Today, Goo, we are discussing Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse. This is the sequel to 2018's Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse. That's right. It's been 5 long years, 4.5 long years since we saw the first movie. This was set to come out in December of last year. It got bumped 6 months. A very long-awaited sequel. Goo, this is a rated PG, animated action, adventure, comedy, family, fantasy, and sci-fi. It fulfills all of those things to as far as you can go, pretty much.
Yes.
Runtime of 140 minutes. I think that's about 25 minutes longer than the first one. And it doesn't feel long. So you're not at all bored at any point during this movie, but towards the end, you know it's sort of towards the end. You feel like there's a lot to happen. You're like, I don't really know what's going to happen here. And so we get a sequel. We get a sequel to the sequel, a threequel. But this movie, Goo, what a lot of people said about the first one, I think this movie greater than.
Yes, I would say that going into the first one, I feel like the first one surprised a ton of people and, just exceeded expectations. This one, you are going into it with high expectations and they exceed those expectations.
Yeah, and I think the first one is such a unique movie. We had never seen anything like that before, so it gets a lot of credit for that. I personally give it a lot of credit for like roping me into an animated movie with different animation styles I had never really seen before, that most people had never really seen before. And this movie does that and then some. They introduce even new animation styles, which is amazing. Goo, on Rotten Tomatoes currently, 94% from the critics through 66 reviews. The first one got 97. So it seems like this is going to fall short of the critical reviews, which is very surprising.
Not that surprising to me. The first one was easier to consume, a little bit tidier of a story. This one is a bit longer. And maybe if you're saying, is this a kid's movie? It definitely does lend itself to being for a little bit older kids, but also over 2 hours on a movie. You are playing with fire there.
Yeah, 2 hours, 20 minutes. On Metacritic, it has an 87 after 50 reviews. The first one also got an 87, so they're saying on par roughly. The audience score on Rotten Tomatoes for the first one was 93%. This one is going to be higher than that. This might be a 99, 100%er.
Well, I don't count audience score anymore because everyone has just lost their minds.
Fair enough, but I feel like the audience is absolutely going to like this.
Oh, but also hear me out. I don't care about the critics one anymore either. I don't care about Rotten Tomatoes. And I forget who said this, but what you want to do when you're looking for film reviews, movie reviews, don't look at the aggregate of Rotten Tomatoes. Know who you like as a movie reviewer, as a critic, and just listen to that one person. Listen to a handful of people. Don't be a slave to the tomatoes.
Yeah, I mean, in general, I think we can all agree to that. I just think Rotten Tomatoes, as much shit
Mac
as
says that, and he's just eating a tomato right now. If you're listening to the audio, Mac is just nomming on tomatoes right now.
In general, it's a decent little look into how people are viewing the
No,
movie.
It's not.
I actually think it is. The one that's
Metacritic is where it's at now, baby.
I mean, Metacritic is better, I think.
Yes.
The one I would say to never use is Cinema Score. Cinema Score is the absolute worst.
Yeah,
everything's an A, and then even the bad ones are still like C's. So never use Cinema Score. I still think actually IMDb is worse too. Rotten Tomatoes is still pretty good.
If I could vote one thing off the show besides you, it'd be Rotten Tomato scores.
Nah, I like Roddy T's.
Well, then I guess you're out of here.
The idea of Roddy T's is just always going to be good. People just don't understand Roddy T's.
No, we understand Roddy T's.
People
don't. Just stinks.
The people don't. 94% of the critics said they liked it. That's what 94 means. People. Goose, speaking of this movie and our open here, this movie's written by Phil Lord, Christopher Miller, and Dave Callaham. And it is interesting to note here, the first movie, Christopher Miller does not have a writing credit on. And I don't know why that is. I don't think we ever really talked about that initially. So that's interesting. If you don't know Lord and Miller, which you should by now, they did Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs, the first and second one. They did both Lego movies. And of course, they did Into the Spider-Verse. They also directed 21 and 22 Jump Street, which are two of the best comedies of the last 15 years. And other than the sequel to this movie, Beyond the Spider-Verse, the only thing upcoming for the two that you would know of is Christopher Miller has written the upcoming Robot Chicken movie. So that's pretty interesting.
Are they working on Cloudy with a Chance of 3 Balls?
Ooh, that's a
Soon?
nice title. You should pitch that. You should tweet
I
that
might
out.
just pitch the title of like, I know you guys haven't written anything for this movie, but you might have to now.
They do have 3 projects on IMDb that I've never heard of, so I didn't bother giving them to you. Dude, Dave Callaham, we've talked about it a couple times. What an interesting career this man has had. He is the writer from Doom, the Rock movie, The Expendables, Godzilla from 2014, Zombieland Double Tap, Wonder Woman 84, the Mortal Kombat movie that was 2 years ago, and Shang-Chi. And then, of course, now this movie. Was not a writer on the first movie either. I don't know why they brought him in. Just action pieces. I don't know.
I'll tell you what, it doesn't matter because the end result was great.
Yeah, good points. Goo, this is directed by, and this trio here is also directing the next movie, Beyond the Spider-Verse. Joaquin Dos Santos. Prior to this, all he has done is TV stuff, but that does include Avatar: The Last Airbender, The Legend of Korra, and a bunch of DC animated stuff.
Is that your cousin?
Yes. He was also the executive producer on Korra, and also that rebooted Voltron show, Voltron Legendary Defender.
Yeah.
Kemp Powers Goo was a co-director on Soul from 2020, which I liked a decent amount, but was not really, I'll probably never watch it again. He also wrote that movie and wrote One Night in Miami. And then Justin K. Thompson Goo, this is his first ever directing credit. And all he had really done previously was a production designing role or a part of the animation department. So it looks like he's one of the guys they're trying to work into as one of the next animated directors. Goo, synopsis of this movie. It's a long one, and I don't know if it's a good one. Miles Morales returns for the next chapter of the Oscar-winning Spider-Verse saga, an epic adventure that will transport Brooklyn's full-time, friendly neighborhood Spider-Man across the multiverse to join forces with Gwen Stacy and a new team of Spider people to face off with a villain more powerful than anything they have ever encountered.
I guess.
Yeah.
Not great.
It suffices. It's mouthy. It's wordy.
It is mouthy.
Goo, this movie stars Shameik Moore as Miles Morales, Hailee Steinfeld as Gwen Stacy, Oscar Isaac as Miguel O'Hara, Jake Johnson as Peter B. Parker, Issa Rae as Jessica Drew, Brian Tyree Henry as Jefferson Davis, that's Miles' father, Luna Lauren Velez as Rio Morales, that's Miles' mother, Jason Schwartzman as the Spot, and then we also have lesser characters here. Daniel Kaluuya as Hobie Brown, he's Spider-Punk. Andy Samberg as Ben Reilly, the Scarlet Spider. Karen Sony as Spider-Man India. You would know him from the taxi driver from Deadpool.
Of course.
Amanda Stenberg as Margot Kess. She's like the virtual spider bite girl there we see in Miguel O'Hara's Planet. Jorma Taccone as the Italian Adrian Toomes, the Italian Vulture.
I feel seen. Yeah.
That was so good. I loved that part so much. And then Shea Wiggum as George Stacy, Gwen's father.
So great job by the voice cast. They brought these characters to life, especially with the help of just the amazing animation. The animation in this movie is just going to blow you away.
It's just, and it's true about the first one. But this movie, I feel like, is more emotional. So it rings true more about this one, that the animation and the animation styles reflect the on-screen emotions so well in this. And that's especially true in Gwen Stacy's world, where Gwen Stacy's world almost looks like a watercolor painting at times. It's truly amazing, some of the animation.
Let me also ask you this question here, Matt, because I know that you're not as big of a fan of animation, of cartoons. Did you find yourself getting lost and feeling like you weren't even watching an animated movie, like you were actually watching a live action movie?
Yeah, I think the best animated movies take you out of the animation and make you feel like you're watching real human being characters. And I thought this did a great job at that. And that's the reason why I don't traditionally love animated movies, is because I lack the empathy and emotion I'm supposed to have for the characters because they're not real. In this one, I felt it. I felt the emotions. I had empathy for these characters. And that's a massive achievement for me. Because for me, the first one, I didn't necessarily feel that. As good as the first one is, it's not quite as emotional. It's a little more, it's more PG than this.
I think the first one reminds you that you're watching a cartoon often. Like, they get into some slapsticky stuff that you would really only see in a cartoon. And this one might have done that like once or twice, but it didn't do it as many times.
This one is more of a film, as opposed to a movie, as
Mamma
some
mia,
snobs
as
would
the
say.
vulture would say.
But good, this movie, it's not only epic as we expected it to be, more epic than the first one, but it's emotional and relatable. And again,
Emotionable would have sufficed
yeah,
if you would just jam them together.
again, I have a hard time finding those two things true about any animated movie. So credit to this movie. And it does feel more serious and more consequential than the first movie. And that's in large part because we're already invested in Miles. We don't need to get invested from him from the jump because we already are. And now we also are as equally invested in Gwen. And it's a 1A, 1B situation here. It's not a Batman and a Robin situation.
And also, you just mentioned this, and this is one of the reasons why I think this movie, let's get it out of the way, is better than the first movie. And here we go. They're on the table right now. The best Spider-Man movie that we have gotten so far is because we are not dealing with any of the backstory. We do get some for Gwen, but we just jump right into it from the get-go. And it is from start to finish. You know, there are different points of the movie where you might have more action here or more heartfelt story here, but just full 2 hours and 20 minutes is all great.
Yeah, and I think, you know, if we are comparing the first two, which is going to be a natural conversation after this movie, the first one was, like I said, maybe a little more PG. Obviously, it was incredibly innovative and fun, but the comedy was probably also a little too reliant on Peter B. The comedy is more spread out in this one and throughout the film, not just in one moment. And of course, because they have to intro everything in that first movie, it's a little slower going at first. And for me, it was a little jarring seeing some of the new animation. But again, I got to give credit to it for roping me in for that. But this movie, Goo, Across the Spider-Verse, I feel like it's funnier than the first one, more laugh out loud jokes, and to your point, a little less hokey, more actual jokes in the dialogue instead of Family Guy style going out of your way to make a joke.
Are you ready to get into the octagon?
Let's do it.
All right, Mac. Fun factor. How fun was this movie? And like I just said, I think the entire runtime, you're getting different kinds of fun where like you might get more dialogue driven fun, some more funny jokes at the beginning or leading into the third act. And then you just have this great chase scene or this great action scene. And it hits on everything in this movie.
Yeah, I agree. From start to finish, this movie's a blast from all sorts of characters in all sorts of moments. The first one did give us Peter B. Parker, who plays a more subdued role in this. You also got Spider-Pig and Spider-Man Noir. But I feel like in the first one, the humor was reliant on those three characters, mostly Peter B. This one just feels more balanced and more fun throughout.
It's more situational in this movie, too.
Yes, for sure. For sure.
Satisfactor. And I feel like, you know, and we always talk about Empire and, you know, part 2s leading into part 3s of like, this did a great job of ending the first part of a 2-part movie.
Yeah, naturally, because this is the middle part of a 3-part story, a trilogy, there's some blue balls here in the conclusion. But I was certainly satisfied with how balls to the walls this was the whole time. So a lot of balls here going around.
Borometer. Was there any tick of bore? And so not for me. I'm going to speak for maybe a commoner out there that I could see someone getting bored with the mumbo jumbo-y aspects of the multiverse and the different, you know, canon events of Spider-Man lives and all the different type of multiverse things. Because I think people have multiverse fatigue, but I think this movie does it so well that I didn't have any bore with it.
Yeah. We talked about this when we were leaving the theater about the superhero fatigue and multiverse fatigue. And I think what we sort of agreed upon here is that people are just lazy. The fatigue they have is not wanting to remember everything from a million different places, which I get to a certain extent. But at the same time, like you'll watch 800 hours of Law and Order and remember something from 600 episodes ago. So I don't really buy all those noobs opinions on that. To me, I love if it's done well, you can't do anything better.
Well, that's the whole thing is I think the fatigue comes when, you know, say a hero or a story isn't done well and there isn't enough care taken in the writing or how the character's portrayed or, you know, enough good stuff in the story. And that's the reason why some of those lesser movies aren't remembered. But when someone does a great job, say Guardians 3 or this movie, there's no fatigue here.
Well, I think that's two different things, though. I think if a movie's just not good, not great, then
I'm
it's
aware of that,
definitely
but
gonna draw it
people
down.
blame superhero fatigue on that.
Yes, I think they're blaming the fatigue on something that's not fatigue at all. It's just misses.
Those are just bad movies.
Never misses. Yeah.
Those are middling movies.
Yes, correct. Agreed.
All right, Mac. Aquator, is it better than Aquaman?
It is clearly above it.
Halloween, is it going to wane over time for you? And I guess there's nowhere to go but down.
Yeah, I don't know. It'll be I actually want to rewatch this already because I wasn't looking for Easter eggs first time through, so I want to do a rewatch just for that only. But nothing yet, no weaning yet.
Pants Tent City, Excite Bike Mania, what got you going? And there were a cup of two tree, great action, great chase scenes that we really haven't seen anything like in a movie theater, you know, really having to do with the animation and also just what they can do with Spider-Man in an animated world that just jump off the screen to you.
We were anticipating a couple of great surprises in this movie.
Cup of two tray.
And besides those, the ones we anticipated, we got a couple of great surprises. And that was real great pants tent moments. Also, like you said, awesome action. And there was a joke in here that made both of us laugh for 2 minutes each. That really wasn't even like the greatest joke.
No one laughed besides us,
it
right?
Was so perfectly timed and perfectly done. Yeah. You and I giggled for 2 minutes straight.
I also love the fact that, once again, even though it is an animated movie, and I respect animated movies, you don't. You felt something with Miles and Gwen.
With Miles and Gwen and Miles and his parents. And Gwen and her dad.
Yeah, you felt all of it. You felt all of it.
Agreed. Absolutely agreed.
Max Credit Union, I'm giving it to Lord and Miller and the animators.
Yeah, I'll give it to everyone for everything all at once. Everyone deserves everything for this movie. They nailed the animation. The soundtrack was great. The voice acting was great. The joke telling was great. Everything in this movie is great.
For those of you tardy to the Mac and Goo party, we rate everything on a 40 hot dog rating system. Mac, I shall let you go first.
Ooh, wow. Ooh, you're receiving in the second half there, huh? Okay. Goo, this movie is a story about the anomalies and how they stand out, how they need to be contained, how Miles is sort of attached to all of these happenings. So it makes for a great metaphor for those people or those kids who are considered different. You know, Miles is considered different, but he embraces who he is, turning his perceived weakness into an actual strength, a realized strength. And I think that's amazing storytelling and meaningful to a lot of people. Miles, this freestyling teenage artist who acts on impulse versus the older Miguel and his regimented team of Spideys who are mostly devoid of emotion and are also walking that thin line between good and bad is just a great premise. All these guys still ultimately having one enemy in common makes it an awesome three-sided story. Then you sprinkle in Gwen and how her story complements both sides of that Spidey aisle, and it's a perfect story. You can't have, Goo, a perfect sandwich without the perfect accoutrement. And I think that's what Gwen and her backstory does to this movie. It's so necessary for her and for the plot of the movie. And also, they take what is seemingly a small plot point in the first movie, and it ends up being a great tie-in to this movie. We get a villain who we interpret as goofy early on and ends up being terribly menacing and overpowered, and we still understand where he's coming from and his motivations. And like we said, the animation is truly innovative here, built on what the first movie did. We get several new techniques in this, and they're all awesome. And finally, Goo, we're left with a sick lead into a third movie. I am craving more of these characters and this story, and literally had a case of the blue balls in the theater. Now, this movie moved me emotionally. It made me laugh. It left me wanting more. It's been a long time since I've watched a movie like this, especially an animated one. So not only, Goo, do I think this is better than the first movie, I think I agree. This is the best Spider-Man movie ever made. I had Homecoming as number one before that, a little bit ahead of Into the Spider-Verse. Furthermore, Goo, I believe this to be the greatest animated comic book movie of all time, unseating The Incredibles for me. 40 hot dogs.
Well, Mac, I'm glad that you just said 40 hot dogs because it's looking like we've got ourselves a double box thumbs up Magoo.
Oh, ding, 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 ding.
Mac, I will also be going with 40 hot dogs. This is just groundbreaking in every possible way, in its style, in its storytelling. Everything is taken to a whole new level from the first movie. It is ever changing as well. You know, the atmosphere and the emotion of the movie is just moving like jazz. They use a great soundtrack, not to the point of the first one. The first one was a little more reliant on music. This one didn't really need that. The characters are just so wonderfully written, animated, performed. It just feels like a live action movie. And, you know, Miles is a great character. But what they do with Gwen here, like, this is the Gwen Stacy movie that everyone asked for after the first movie, where it's almost like I came out of it thinking it's a 55-45 split of Miles and Gwen. And either of them could have carried their own movie, but both of them are just such great characters and what they gave us. Also, I love Spider-Punk and the animation that they gave us with him and how different that is. It looks like a punk rock scene, like an old concert poster. That looks awesome. The first half of the movie is building up Gwen and Miles once again. The second half is just amazing action, animation, throwing everything at you on the screen. And, you know, I've seen some people who don't care for the amount of colors and animation that we got there, but I thought that that was a roller coaster ride that we earned. Like, we got there. It wasn't just like, you know, from the get-go, let's throw colors at you, which they kind of did with Gwen stuff, but they built up to it. And everything in this movie is built up to through the first movie. I love this movie. It is the best Spider-Man movie. It is the best movie on the year so far. I might be with you on best animated comic book movie. I'd have to think about it, but I'm pretty sure you're right.
Let me throw some movies at you for that.
Yeah, go ahead.
The Incredibles, obviously, is the one I mentioned. Big Hero 6 is up there. Mask of the Phantasm is the one I figure you might have number one.
If they were able to tidy up the animation and make it more modern, I think that story could be up there with this.
Okay. And then some other ones that I know people talk about. Under the Red Hood is up there on a lot of lists. The Dark Knight Returns, but that is a two-parter, so it might hurt each one individually. Of course, the first one of these movies, Into the Spider-Verse, some people say is the best. And then you also have movies like Lego Batman that people really love too. But to me, the only real competition to this for me on my list was The Incredibles. And because The Incredibles does something similar where it brings you that family element and you care for these characters. And as good as it is, I don't think it feels as personal and live action like as this one does. That's why I put this one over that.
And then you have it as the top movie on the year?
Number one movie of 2023. First 40 dogger I've given out since Everything Everywhere All at Once, which is the only 40 dogger I had last year.
I'm going to put a bullet on that.
Boom.
How do you feel about that? Bang.
Double 40s.
Pew, 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 pew. Oh, hi. It's Goo from the Mac and Goo Movie Club. If you like what you just saw, you can find full episodes of our program on Apple Podcasts, TuneIn, Stitcher, CastBox, iHeartRadio, or wherever podcasts are found. And now it's time for girls jumping on trampolines.